We haven't even begun talking about the Xbox One. You've already started drinking. This is a sign of things to come.
Pretty much. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm sorry for the long delay since the end of the year to the beginning of the year. I wanted to put up a couple more videos, but it's just been mostly work and anything. So I'm back here at the house. I'm in front of the video game wall here with Russian conscript.
How is everyone doing?
Yeah, so he's joining me actually because I wanted to talk about this. So first of all, jump cut aside. What I want to do first is I want to focus on both, positive and negative. For me, I will just outlining it, spoiling it for anybody who wants to complain about it. I mostly have positive things to say about this machine in my experiences with it. Really, most of the things I don't like about it are nitpicks, and I'll say that up front right at the beginning. They're mostly little nitpicks. I did find them irritating though, and they're not deal breakers by any stretch because obviously I have it and I have games for it. I'll start off with the negative pieces of what I felt about it. And then obviously if you've got anything you want to add, feel free to chime in. So like I said, the negative things are really nitpicks, but here's what I've got. The very first thing that I got when I got this machine out of the box and loaded it up, put it up, hooked it up to the internet, set up the Wi-Fi and did everything, it was stuff I already knew. So I'm not counting it as like a major negative because I knew what I was getting into going in. But obviously the more the last generation and this generation, the more they try to be like PCs, the more they pick up the little things that I hate about PC gaming. I hate downloading things. I know that that's part of it the way it is now. That's fine. But right out of the box, I knew that as soon as I plugged this in, it was going to be a couple of hours for it to download everything. And my internet's pretty decent speed. So I knew that going in, so I plugged it in. And basically, once I got the Wi-Fi set up and I started the downloads, I basically walked away from it. And it wasn't until a couple of hours later that I was able to put in a game. And again, you have to download the information from the game, install it on the hard drive, and then you can finally get to playing. As somebody who had games going back to the Nintendo Entertainment System, it is expected, but at the same time, it's something you don't look forward to. I can't just put in the disc and play the game. I have to install it, load it, download it. You know, if there's any new patches, I can avoid it, but it's not really complete if I don't download the patch. So that part coming from like the PC world where you have to download things and get it loaded up, that's something that I could do without, but I know it's part of the nature of the beast now.
Realistically, unfortunately, now that, as Carlos is playing, that is a bit of a common complaint, especially with the last generation and everything moving onward, I'm afraid. Just generally, everything that requires either a substantial amount of update time or install time. Basically, the minute you insert a disk, you don't even get started. It basically just starts the installation process. So then you can by that point, you have to wait before you can even start the game. So basically, I'll install anything that's on there. It'll automatically start searching online to see if there are any updates or anything that also need to be installed. And quite frankly, if you just picked up the thing for like 60, 70, if you're in our neck of the woods up here, up north, basically $80+ it feels like at times. It's like, that's a lot of thing in order to pick it up from a brick and mortar store or get it shipped from like something like Amazon. Your preference may vary on how you get it. But basically, to get the thing, to put it in your system, only have to wait longer in order to set it up. Yeah, a bit of an aggravation, considering that we grew up during the days where you would take a cart or a CD for like the older CD-based systems, and basically you put that in the system, you can usually just start right away.
So on the same vein as downloading though, I'll keep this piece short, but as an overall, not even complaint, but something that I'm not a big fan of, right out of the box. So with this system, this was the Gears of War Ultimate Edition. So I got it, the game that came along with it was the good old Gears of War right here. So, you know, you can see obviously it's not really a game, it's the card. It's the card with the download codes and the DLC to go along with it. So all the codes are in the back. I actually already sold this game, so the person that bought it on eBay got all the codes on the back of this. And if they want the card, I'll mail it to them as well. But here's the problem I have with this. This is supposed to be the add-in. This is supposed to be the game that comes with this system. I've never been a Gears of War fan, but so for me, it was fine. I actually probably got about $30, $35 back for this, so that was great. It offset what I paid for the system. But the thing is, if I wanted to play this, in addition to the patches and updates that you have to load in order to even get this going. Then I have to download the game. Well, I went and I checked really briefly just because I was curious. And this is, I think, a 40 gig, 45 gig game, something like that. So I'd have to download a 40 to 45 gigabyte file. I'm sure that I can play it with the partial download, but I have to download a 40 gigabyte game, load it onto the hard drive in order to even play this thing. I have the fastest internet I can get here, the fastest DSL. We have access to cable, which would be quicker, but it tends to get throttled in this area. So the internet I have, downloading 40 gigs isn't really a deal breaker by itself. But I have a 250 gigabyte cap. So downloading a 40 gigabyte file, even if I wanted to play that game, which I really don't, but even if I did, 40 gigabytes out of a 250 gigabyte thing, plus a couple of gigabytes to download the software to begin with, it doesn't make any sense. Attached to that, also with the download, we'll talk about things related to that in a minute, but it's still talking about downloads. When I loaded this, part of the reason that I picked up this one, I'm going to get the PS4 as well at some point, and we'll have a similar video where we can talk about that. But the thing is, when I got this one, part of the reason is I wanted to put it in my living room. This model is the first Xbox that can play Blu-rays. It already is set up for it. It has the laser, so I was able to play Blu-rays on it, which is great. That means I could play my movies on it, which is awesome. And I even went through the trouble of getting the remote control. Paid an extra $25 to get the remote. And I'm going to talk about this later, but all part of the package so that I could have this as my main Blu-ray player in my living room. That was the idea. And as that, kind of a little spoiler to the positives, it works pretty well for that. I like how it works. The interface is pretty straightforward. This remote is actually not too bad, but I'll talk about this in a minute. So you have to excuse the jump cut, but the camera actually stopped recording partway through. But the point that I was trying to get at was that as part of the downloading element of this, you have an app that Microsoft created to play the Blu-ray that actually allows you to put the disc in and it plays right away. It's 55 megabytes. That's it. It's a 55 megabyte app. Like I said, it's a nitpicking thing, but Microsoft, with all the money that they have, all the money they've made, you went through the trouble of creating the app, why don't you just preload it onto the machine? It's not really that much more work than all the other software you've already installed. I had a multiple gigabyte update that came right when I installed this and hooked it up to Wi-Fi immediately. You could have included it as part of that. It was like 2 or 3 gigabytes. 55 megs more would have completely gone under the radar, and I should have been able to put the disc in right off the top and make it work. So that's, again, like I said, little things that Microsoft does that don't make any sense. It's not like it was a lot of work in order to actually download it, because regardless, I went through to download the YouTube app. I went through to download a Twitch app. I went through to download like the NHL app so I could stream some games on this if I want to. That's fine. I was going to do it either way, but it was then that I went in and I had to download the Blu-ray one to make it play the movies, which is one of the reasons I bought it in the first place. So that's just lazy Microsoft. Now, overall, you know, it wouldn't really in what we were doing, where we were testing, it really wouldn't be much of an impact on you. But before I get to anything else, did you have any thoughts of anything that struck you as a little bit odd or that was off about the system when you did get a chance to play with it?
In terms of the actual operation of the system, other than the fact of just not being as used to the general interface, just to kind of put this as a background, in terms of systems I've personally owned, or between the two of us we've owned that I've used more of, usually my background would be on the Sony end of things, so obviously you got your original PlayStation, PS2, I own PS3, and only in more recent times, more recent months, did I actually acquire an Xbox 360 for usage, and even then that hasn't seen nearly as much usage as the other systems. Generally speaking, the only thing is maybe when starting up one or two of the games that Carlos has here, where even though the system seemed to already be logged in with his account, which is, as far as I know, the only account on there, the game itself would ask us to log in on certain intervals, especially starting one of the games, in this case Warzone 3 Ultimate. It asked during the original game startup in order to log in, and during bits where there was a bit more lull, so basically pause the game, run off to do something else quickly and come back, it would ask us to re-log into that account even though it was technically still in mid-play, which is something I found more curious. Not exactly a real problem per se, but just kind of a little quirk that came up. Other than that, everything else seemed pretty standard fare as far as I'm concerned.
Now I'm going to talk about the actual playing of Blu-rays. Overall, as like a hub for media, I liked it. You know, a lot of times when I come home, I'm doing a couple of things just before I'm making my dinner and whatnot. I'll put on the YouTube app and I'll be playing videos. Works great, no problem. I like how a lot of the apps are set up. The interface is okay. It's not the greatest, but it's functional. I can get to what I need to get to fairly quickly. Logging in is not a big deal. It's not a huge burden. Once I get everything going, I'm pretty happy with it. But now I can actually talk about the experience of playing the movies on this, and one, again, little thing that I don't understand why Microsoft, with all the QA testers they have, they've made either a conscious effort to ignore little functional things, or they've completely managed to miss them. So I'm going to come back to the remote. Like I said, $25 for the remote, which is fairly reasonable. It's a nice compact remote. I actually like the design of this thing, and I don't know if you can see the buttons set on it, but it's pretty straightforward. You can figure out how to play, how to pause, how to rewind, all that. It's here, no problem. It's got the basic things you require. One thing it does not have is an eject button. There is no eject button on this. So those of you who own the system and maybe have this remote, you've already figured that out. There is no eject button. Here's the thing. Let's say you don't have one of these and you use this remote. There's no way to eject using this either. The only way you can actually eject. Now, that may change with a firmware update where maybe a sequence of buttons will do it, but to this moment, to my knowledge, you can't eject using this or this. The only way you can eject a disk out of this machine is to actually go to the front of the machine and use the eject button that's on it. Again, is that a deal breaker? No. Is that, a huge fatal flaw in the design of the machine? No. But it's, why wouldn't you have it? Why would you neglect it? You included the most basic functions you would include on a remote. You kept the remote at a small size. There's enough room to put an eject button on it. So for comparison, I brought one over, if you could be so kind. The PlayStation 3 remote. The previous generation remote. You can see it's got a ton of buttons on it. This was $25 when I bought it. And amongst the buttons it has, right on the top corner, eject. This is last generation's technology. This is the new one, and we can't even eject. You can see comparison between the two. They cost the same in the respective times when they were out.
In this case, the interject, something I just noticed as Carlos was waving this particular one around, is just, well, other than the fact that, as a quick comparison point, while I understand they wanted a cleaner interface with this, there's actually no labeling whatsoever on the Xbox One's remote here. And another thing which I just realized as Carlos was waving around is that every time you pick it up, it actually lights up in your hand, which it's a nice feature, but unless you're in an absolute dark room, it seems unnecessary, I'm going to be quite frank.
It's reflective of every time I see a little issue with this, it's Microsoft not bothering to do something that should be pretty easy to do, I would think. And I don't understand why. Why don't you have an eject button? Or a way for me to eject using what you have? Why do I have to download an app to get the functionality out of this that should be there? Again, is it an issue that's going to ruin the experience for me? Not necessarily. Is it a couple of seconds out of my day? Sure. Along the same lines, I didn't want to download this because it was a bit of a pain, but even if I wanted to play it, even if I was willing to download it, fine. But if you're including it with the system, you could just preload it onto the machine. Now, I grant you, I'm glad they didn't, because I ended up selling it to someone else who will actually play the game, which is fine. But it doesn't make a lot of sense. You're including it anyway, you may as well just load it on the machine. And you know what? I'd rather just give me a real game. Load it on the machine and give me the disc. That's just a personal preference thing.
To kind of follow up what Carlos was saying regarding actually preference towards a physical copy, certain retailers such as GameStop and EB Games actually during the holiday season started offering physical copies of some of the games that would have been included as digital only copies as part of their bundles to just try to help kind of encourage people to buy from them, because at least that way you could avoid at least some of the install times from some of these offerings, and also that would be a way to get people to purchase their version of the bundle as opposed to most of the regular competition they had that offered only the digital version of it.
Indeed. So, like I said, for the most part, the downsides, hopefully with editing we haven't spent too much time dwelling on it, but the downsides are mostly small. Some of them are this generation's problems, a lot of the download stuff. The avoidable download stuff, though, I can't excuse that way. But having to install and download games, that's this generation and last generation. So this is the new way they're going to do it. Here's a disc, but it's really an install disc. Fine. But anything else where I could have just had it loaded on here, why don't you just load it on? As part of the manufacturing process, put it on the hard drive for me so that it's ready to go, so that I don't have to install a basic app to get the functionality that is one of the selling points of this machine. That's all I say about that. But let's talk about the upside, because there's some really nice stuff. I'll start off, and then if you want to add anything to it, by all means. The big thing is, I like the library of games for the most part. There are some good games, like this one here is a fun game. Roberto will tell you more because he was enjoying this game quite a bit today. It pushed our video recording back because how much he was enjoying this. But I'll just talk about the ones. I'll show the games, and then if you have anything to add once we get going. Rare Replay. So any of you who are not familiar, this is basically a library of rare games from the public manufacturer. No, I should say from the publisher. Yeah. Rare. So Banjo-Kazooie, Perfect Dark, like a series of them. Going back years, all the way into much older games. Battletoads, obviously, is a very popular one here. Great title. $30 in a lot of places. Cheaper now if you go into some, when it goes on sale. Really good deal for it. And these are not in any particular order. It's just the order I have them here. Saints Row. So you could get this on last generation, PS3 and Xbox One, but this is really nice graphically, really fun, and it includes all the DLC and everything. So this generation, you're going to get a lot of definitive editions. So this is a really nice title. I've played a fair number of hours on this, and I've had some fun with it. I haven't even gotten around to the get out of hell part of it yet, and I will. This one I picked up just because I was curious about it. Dead Rising 3. I know there's an updated version of this with probably more content. I've barely just started playing this at all. More than anything, I just wanted to try it out. I was just having some fun with it. Madden 15, just because I gotta have a Madden game on here. I'll get a better one later on, but I was able to get this one cheap, so I just played it a little bit here and there. This game was surprisingly fun. Scream Ride. I got this one for $15, and I've actually had a lot of fun with it. The physics in the game where you're in one of the modes, you're basically controlling a ball with some people in it. We're trying to launch it into buildings to knock the buildings down. The physics of you hitting one part of the building and it collapsing in a certain way, and you get your points that way. It's a silly game, but it's a fun game. I wouldn't surprise me if this was or could be turned into a mobile game, because it feels kind of like that. But for the price, I've actually got enough enjoyment out of it. And the graphics are actually pretty nice for what it is. This is a fairly early title. And along the same lines, Trials Fusion. Again, really silly game, simple, but I put it on, play it for about 20 minutes, have a little bit of fun, and then move on. Cheap games. Games like this that are inexpensive are fun to have in the collection for that reason.
In terms of my experience, which is admittedly a little more limited since I've only passed by on occasion in order to play Carlos's unit here. One of the games I did play, probably the first one, was actually this Rare Replay here, which is indeed, as Carlos already mentioned, a collection of various titles from over the years by the publisher known as Rare, which is currently owned by Microsoft. Most of the games were indeed, of the ones I had the opportunity to play at the time, were from the NES era of games for the most part, so your Pro-Am RC was one of them. Played, or at least I looked a little bit at the NES Battletoads. I actually played completely through the arcades entry, which is actually interesting because they had never actually released that in any home format up till now. And generally speaking, Blast Corps is another game I played. Generally speaking, everything seemed to handle really well there. It was fairly well upsized and scaled up for using it on the newer system here compared to the original ones. Admittedly, you're not exactly pushing the system limits with a game like this or a collection like this, but it's still nice to have there. It is a really good value for what they were asking for, which is originally around $30, give or take. A really good, solid pick. The other one, which, as Carlos mentioned, I got a bit into because our recording here today has actually been delayed by a few hours because I got carried away with playing Warriors Orochi 3 Ultimate Edition, which is actually the definitive version of this particular title, which has had the original release. There was an updated version for the Wii U, which I believe is Warriors Orochi 3 Upper. And this is the more definitive, kind of really upscale product. Generally speaking, I really enjoy playing the Muso style of gameplay on the games that I've had. Probably the one I spent the most of on my Wii U was actually Hyrule Warriors, which is based off the same formula. Very fun gameplay, amazingly fun in order to go basically beating up the hell out of just about everything you come across here. And it's very easy to lose track of time as you're playing through the various missions of this game, which is plentiful. The story related to this game and voice acting top notch as far as I'm concerned there. Very fun to go through. Just when you start playing this sort of thing, make sure you have a lot of time in your hands because you will get carried away very easily. Another thing actually that I'll bring up while I'm here is because of the various systems I've had the opportunity to play with, just a general comparison of how the controller for the Xbox One is actually set up here. It's actually got a really nice heft to it, especially compared to the controllers available from the last generation by Microsoft. I actually feel that in this case the controller handles rather nicely on here. They use a nicer, it's a matte style kind of plastic that they use on the surface here, which I feel actually handles or at least feels nicer to hold on to than the previous generation system there. And while the one I have here is uncorded, basically they have a spot here where you could plug it in order to, I imagine if you have the kind of plug and play charging kit, you can set that up easy enough, as well as just kind of set it up for a direct play there, if I'm correct on that.
Yep. Now, I'll add one thing. I won't get into too much detail on it because there is a lot of things you could say and talk about, but I will say one thing, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this one or not. Yeah. But there's the controller itself is actually, I'll agree, it's a really comfortable controller. I like it. I've enjoyed playing with it. It's been very comfortable. Now, the one thing that I also like a lot, and when I was initially trying it, I used it a lot more, but it's something that I can use, and it's nice to have. Mm-hmm. It's got an audio jack on it. So the thing is, the audio jack down here means that if I'm playing later on in the evening, which I do sometimes since I tend to stay up later, so if I've got a little bit of time and I want to play here in the condo and I don't want to annoy neighbors or get any complaints or anything, I can plug in a headphone jack to this, and even though it's wireless, the audio then goes straight into my headphones. So that means that I can be playing the game, hearing what it is, and not disturbing or bothering anyone. Same if I'm watching videos or anything else. I can put this on here and I can actually listen. Now I haven't tried it with YouTube or anything like that, but I should be able to do the same thing. The audio will then come from here instead, and I can mute the television if it doesn't mute it automatically. I haven't used it in a bit, so I can't remember if it'll do it by itself. So that's kind of a nice feature. A little add-on, not a big deal, but a nice feature they threw in there. So whereas in some parts they'll neglect little details, other things like the headphone jack is a great addition to the hardware that comes out of the box. So, in conclusion, really the big thing is, for the most part, I'm overall very happy with the machine. The nitpicks that I have tend to be more things that annoy me. If you're a more hardcore gamer though, you will have some things you don't like. But I will say from my experiences of it, other than things where again Microsoft could have built it in, I like the graphics overall. I feel the performance on a lot of these games has been pretty good. Now, admittedly, a lot of these games are not pushing the boundaries of what it can do. And the PS4 is, from what I remember of it, a more powerful machine. But with that said, for the value that I've gotten out of the games, I've gotten good value out of it. I feel like I've gotten a good return on the investment I've made. I've been able to play it. And the big thing for me is that when I actually get around to playing games, I don't have a lot of time. I value being able to just pick up a game, playing it for a little while, and then using it. And also I really value using it kind of as a media hub. Playing video games is great. That's a big part of what it is. but also at the same time being able to go in, put on a YouTube video, watch a series of them while I'm doing something else, and just playing it in the background.
So generally speaking, overall, it's a very solid system for the most part here. Aside from some nitpicks, which unfortunately seem to be things which would be... I think we'll just wing it. Part. Yeah.
I'm leaving that in.
Yeah. Pardon the background noise you might be hearing, just something going on there. But generally speaking, regarding the Xbox One, very solid system. Most of the complaints that Carlos and I would share about this are unfortunately things that are unfortunately native to how current generation, even the last console generation systems work, with how downloads are basically mandatory for just about everything. But in terms of the actual functionality of the system itself, as well as the library, can't really complain. It's fairly solid at this point of the system's life cycle overall.
So that's kind of just our impressions of the Xbox One. He had a limited chance to try some of it out. I've had a chance to play with it a little longer. That's just our impressions at this point in its life cycle. We'd love to hear, your thoughts on it. If you already have a system or if you're thinking about getting it. Also, please like, subscribe, and comment. And if you'd like to check out this man's videos,
my website is IamManyNinjas.com, which will be receiving an update very shortly from now, just to cover some of the new content there. Also, I have a Twitter account, @ManyNinjas on Twitter, where I pretty much put updates and also links to videos as they come up.
I'll include it in the description in case you're interested. Please like, subscribe, and comment the video. We very much appreciate it. Thanks for watching. I feel strongly we've done this right. Do you not feel so?
Well, aside from the fact you had to reset the laptop, yes.
Well, that's your fault. You touched it and the laptop rebelled, a lot of anger. Vindictive rage.
I'm pretty sure it was the evil priest in that game.
I was using it for 2 hours without any issue. This is the greatest video you've ever made in your career. Bar none. Bar none.
And we're done, ladies and gentlemen.